And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so delighted to host the amazing New York Times bestselling author, Lucy Foley of The Guest List, and most recently, The Paris Apartment, broadcasting live from Belgium to give us the skinny on the Paris Apartment. How appropriate. Lucy, welcome. Tell us about this book.
Well, it's a kind of, I suppose it's a murder mystery. It's also a kind of love letter to Paris, the city, a kind of love letter to a time outside COVID of sort of crowded bars and metro carriages and, just being able to do whatever. But obviously there's also a murder, so it's quite dark. Really, the kind of premise is Jess turns up to stay with her brother Ben. When she arrives in Paris, she realizes he's been staying in a much swankier place than she would have expected in this beautiful apartment building. But when she actually gets there, Ben is missing, and she begins to suspect from sort of various clues around his apartment building and the way the other residents of this apartment building are behaving towards her, that something rather nasty has happened to him. So she begins to follow this thread. So she's really kind of our sleuth character in the book.
She is our sleuth character, and I am rooting for her every step of the way. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, and Lucy, I'm loving this book. So I've been following your work for years. I'm a huge fan, and I cannot wait to get into every single detail, both from a reader perspective and from a craft perspective. But first, I just want to welcome everyone who's watching. We are broadcasting live to 6 destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right place. This is the right time. If you've been here before, you know how it works. Get your questions going in the comments. This is your time to talk to Lucy, to ask her about Jess, about Ben, about Paris, how she does it. We have so many questions. Get them going. Leslie, welcome to the conversation. She's saying hello from Canada. That's her signature Canadian hello. Leslie, great to have you. So, Lucy, let's jump into it. So, speaking of threads, there is a lot of threads in this book, and I am just sort of in awe of how you do that from a craft perspective, because every single one of these characters, Jess has a backstory. She's holding a dark secret. We don't know what it is. Ben has at least a few secrets of his own. We've got Nick, the hot neighbor downstairs. We've got the austere rich lady on the top floor. We've got the kind of weird, funky 18-year-old on the 4th floor. All these people, and they all have secrets. The gatekeeper, concierge, older woman. Oh my God. First of all, I care about all of these characters, and all of these characters have a dark secret they're holding. How do you do it? How do you keep it straight? Are you a plotter? I mean, is your brain like a beautiful mind in there? What's going on?
I think my brain is like a big tangle of wool with just sort of lots of knots, and it's a scary place. No, so I do start off with a plot. I think if I didn't have a sort of vague roadmap where I'm going, I would be completely lost. But to be honest, I know even doing that, I know by now, kind of 6th book, that even when I plot really, really, really carefully, once I start writing, things are going to start changing, and that I kind of have to allow them to start changing, because that's often, I think, when the characters start kind of driving the plot themselves, and that means something kind of lovely and organic is happening. Obviously, you have to retain some control and sort of kind of mini plot things out in advance. But I love those surprises that come to you while writing, and I love those characters that kind of demand more screen time, or characters that kind of, it sounds like a really naff thing to say, but sort of reveal their secrets to you later in the writing process. And those are often the most kind of thrilling moments as a writer, I think.
Ooh, so without any spoilers, who is a character who gave you the biggest surprise in this book? Was it Ben? Was it Jess, Mrs. Meunier? Is it Meunier?
Meunier. I want to say that, although my French pronunciation is terrible. So I live in Belgium, and I just get people giving me nonplussed looks all the time when I try and speak French, which I do every day. So who was the biggest surprise? So I suppose probably the concierge. I loved writing her as a character because she's quite a kind of, it's quite an old-fashioned role in some ways in Paris. So traditionally, Parisian apartments, kind of very swanky Parisian apartments, would have this figure of the concierge who would taken the post to let visitors in, kind of keep the building spick and span, the hallways, the kind of public areas, all of that. And so she is that, and she literally lives in this kind of little cabin in the courtyard garden of this building, while, you know, a few meters away, really, all of the inhabitants of the building are living in kind of incredible luxury. So there's a sort of real contrast, and she's kind of, if you think of a sort of golden age murder mystery with sort of upstairs, downstairs characters, she's my downstairs character. But I just loved writing her because as I started writing her, I realized that she has this real kind of power. She is sort of invisible to the inhabitants of this building. They don't really see her because she just kind of works for them. She's just that kind of lady in the garden who sort of, you know, they don't even really see her as sort of human. And because of that, she's sort of privy to so many secrets. She's privy, she sees things, she hears things, and she sort of has her own agency. And so I loved writing her, and she became a really kind of, without spoiling anything, a really central part of the story.
Ooh, well, thank you for that. We have someone saying that Kathy Silvas joining us from Mystery and Thriller Mavens private Facebook group saying the concierge is a great character. Absolutely. I totally agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And Leslie would like to know, Leslie is chiming in to say she also loved it. And she would like to know, Lucy, what was your inspiration for this book? Dying to know.
Well, I was really lucky. It sort of fell into my lap slightly. I was on a sort of self-designated writing retreat, I guess. I've never actually been in a proper writing retreat with loads of other authors, but I like to book a kind of cheap rental somewhere and go away and focus on writing a book away from kind of home and distractions and things. And so I'd done that with the guest list, the previous book. I'd gone to Paris. I was staying in this kind of really sort of vintage apartment. I don't think anything had been changed in there for maybe half a century. I think it was someone's granny's apartment, like this family, but it had kind of beautiful old bones. Like it was really high ceilings, kind of wooden parquet floorboards. It was gorgeous, and kind of looked onto this central courtyard. And I would sort of be writing there at all hours of the day and night, really, and I'd see people coming and going. I'd see lights coming on and off in the other apartments because I could sort of see into them from my apartment, and I could also hear sounds from the apartment, particularly the apartment above me. There was something weird going on up there, something very heavy being dragged across the floor, very strange. And you know, it just got me thinking, like, this is the perfect setting for a murder mystery, and I kind of want to be the one to write it. And so really that apartment kind of found its way wholesale into the novel. And I just wanted to use all of the elements of it, like the kind of spiral staircase. There are obviously elements I added myself, so the kind of basement in this building and the attic quarters up above. But that courtyard garden, the beautiful old apartments, the spiral staircase, all of that went straight in.
When you heard the heavy thing being dragged across the floor, did you think it's a body?
Well, yeah, but I can't believe I didn't sort of think any more than, oh, I want to write a book about this, not maybe I should investigate, as Jess would, you know, maybe I should call the police. Maybe I should, something weird's going on. It's probably not a calling the police moment, but yeah, all I thought as a writer was, oh, great, here's a story.
Right. Shall I call 911 or in Paris 112? Or should I take to my computer and write this down? Oh my God. I love it. Michelle, welcome to the conversation. She's saying, hello, Lucy and Sarah from Canada. Michelle, thanks so much for joining us. So lovely to be here. Monica Faye, welcome to the conversation. She's saying, hell yes to all of them. Monica, welcome. So great to have you. And I love picturing you in this building because you describe it so well that I actually feel like I can see it. Everything from the silk wallpaper to the dumbwaiter. I love that there's a dumbwaiter, to the U shape of the building, which gives everyone sort of unique access into the place and into the places across from them. There's a lot of watching, a lot of voyeuristic happening here. Oh my goodness. Okay. Someone is saying, hello, ladies. If you're watching from a private Facebook group, by the way, you have to allow privacy if you want us to see your Facebook picture. Otherwise, you can stay very mysterious. That's on brand for us. Saying, hello, ladies. What a wonderful author chat. I loved the guest list, and my editor is considering designing my next book cover based on your guest list cover, which I would love. It's so atmospheric. Yay. The guest list had a gorgeous color and the cover, and the Paris apartment also has a gorgeous cover. I love the bright pop of font. I love the building. It's just, did you get any say into
well, yeah, it's so interesting because both times when they sent me those covers, it was like, oh, they've nailed it. Because as an author, you're used to, it sounds awful, I don't ever want to be like a fussy author, but I don't know what you find, but you often get sent a cover, and I think as the author you want to get kind of everything that the book's about onto that cover. So you'd be like the worst person to design it because it would just be a big old mess. But when they sent me both of those covers, I was like, this is perfect. I was like, is there anything I want to change? I feel like I should have some input here, but there's nothing I want to change. It's just perfect. Both of them really were the book for me.
Wow, that's so great, because I know some people aren't happy with them, and some people seem to get, depending on your publisher, you get more or less input. So because I mean, I could never do that. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not an artist. So for someone to take the concept of the book and render it into a picture is just sort of amazing to me. And I'm so glad that you're happy with yours. Georgina is clarifying. This is Georgina Cross about the book cover. Welcome to the conversation, Georgina, an amazing thriller author there as well. Lucy, this book is racking up. I don't want to say racking up, is earning incredible praise. Congratulations on all of it. Ruth Ware raving, the streets of Paris have never looked darker, more opulent, or more sinister than in Lucy Foley's gloriously twisty new novel. So I am a huge fan of Ruth. She's been on the show 2 times as well. So high praise from her. What do you think is the key to writing that twisty? You said that you plot it out, but then you allow yourself to be surprised. But do you ever get to the end where you're like, not enough twists? I need one on page 53.
Yeah, no, I think most of it happens quite organically. And I think there's a point, I don't know if you find this, but there's a point in writing where you're just so inside the book that it's kind of like, just ideas are kind of bubbling up everywhere. It feels kind of suddenly really like fertile, and you're kind of right inside it. And so almost, I think I probably have to hold myself back from kind of adding in like another twist here and another twist there. And you don't really want to give your reader kind of whiplash and have them not having time to sort of concentrate and feel the impact of those kind of reveals and twists. So it's like it's a real balancing act, I think.
A balancing act, exactly. That's one balancing act. Another one is you don't want people to get to page 300 and say, oh my God, there was a concierge, or this is her backstory, but you don't want them to get to page 2 and be like, it was the butler, so how
Totally.
That's another, how do you crowdsource it? Do you send it out to some beta readers and say, is this enough twists? Is this enough shock? Or is this enough clues? Or how do you find that balance?
Yeah, that's probably the most difficult part of writing this kind of book. I think it's like, I imagine it like a scale, and you're kind of putting things on one side of the scale, and you need to have your breadcrumbs there for the reader. But at the same time, if you have too many breadcrumbs, then you're going to tip the scale and they're going to guess too early. And I think there's a real difference as well between feeling kind of surprised and that wonderful like aha moment, and feeling tricked where you're like, but that character, like I barely even felt like I met them and they did it. Like what?
Yes.
So it needs to feel. It needs to feel not like a cheap trick. It needs to be that like wonderful kind of satisfying, like, oh, right, okay, I could have seen that coming all along. And yeah, I think one of the best ways to do it is other readers. So because obviously as the author, you've lost your innocence quite early on, so everything seems really obvious to you. So I use my editor for that. I use several kind of beta readers. I use my husband, poor guy. But you realize, of course, as each of those readers has read it, they've lost their innocence as well. So they're kind of in on the secret. So you need to kind of use someone else. So it's all kind of difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Do you ever get feedback from your husband where you think where it leads to a chilly silence over dinner because that is not what you wanted to hear?
I think I've got good at just like taking the feedback. I think he would say absolutely not. He'd say I'm like an emotional wreck, but I think I've got better at just taking it on the chin. But he is brilliant. He's honest almost for fault with me at times.
Is that
But you
hard?
need that. You really need that with a reader. You don't want someone to be just say, you know, oh, it's all wonderful, it's great, lovely. You need them to read with that kind of pair of sort of that pair of goggles on, editing goggles.
Yes, I love that. I find it hard to receive sometimes without being defensive, but it's so important. And I try to trim that ego.
It's your baby, you know, and also it's something quite intimate. Like it's sort of the contents of your brain, and you spent a long time sort of working on it on your own. So I think to show it to other people is sort of very exposing, especially those first readers. You're like, please treat it kindly.
Yes, exactly. So Lucy, how do you transition from that vulnerability, this is my baby and also the contents of my brain, please treat it kindly, to being fully out there in the world, just raw and vulnerable, and maybe getting some unfavorable reviews? How do you brace your vulnerable heart?
I think the key thing is just to kind of, I mean, the main thing about publishing a book is just it's so exciting, because it's so exciting to finally have that conversation with readers and have kind of readers talking about these characters that just existed in your head or inside your laptop for so long, and you know, talking about them as though they're real people. That's such a thrill as a writer, quite a sort of egotistical thrill probably. You're like, oh, you know, people believe in them. So I've kind of done my job. But obviously there's going to be some kind of negative feedback along the way, and I very much you know, lots of the characters I write are kind of characters you sort of love to hate, or maybe just hate to hate, I don't know. But I think you know, I know with each book that I've got it to a place where I've made it the best book it can possibly be, and I'm proud of it as an author. And so I think that kind of, you know, that makes it kind of easy to sort of emotionally detach myself from anything that comes after, and actually especially with this book, because I wrote it sort of partly just before I had a baby, partly just after I had a baby. So it was this sort of slightly kind of during COVID. I mean, it was obviously really lucky to be able to kind of focus on something like this during COVID, but you know, it was a bit of a journey writing this book, and yeah, I feel particularly proud of it, I think.
Well, I think you should, Lucy, because I think it's your best book yet. I am absolutely loving it, both as a reader and in an admiring way from a craft perspective. It's so well done.
Thank you.
Anissa is saying hello from South Carolina. Anissa, welcome to the conversation. And I believe, did you share that today is your birthday? I may have missed that.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you for spending your birthday with us. We're so happy to have you. Jody is saying hello from Texas. Jody, welcome to the conversation. I finished it last night, and all I can say is, wow, that came out of left field, and giving you claps for that. Thank you so much. Nancy Wren Murrow, who is also a Bookstagrammer, is saying hello. Nancy, welcome to the conversation. So great to have you here. Layla is saying hello from Savannah, Georgia. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. So you know how this works. This is your time. I hope I didn't miss anybody's questions, but this is your time to ask Lucy questions. So get them going in the comments, and I will get them right over to her. Meanwhile, I am going to share this amazing review. So from Town and Country, The Paris Apartment is a charming thriller that'll have us all eyeing the neighbors a bit skeptically, no matter where it is we live. Absolutely. Because one of the things that I love about this is that because they're all watching each other, and because they're all suspicious of each other. And if you live in an apartment, which I do, and you do see your neighbors across the way, don't you? And you start to wonder, who are they and what are they doing? So if you hear something heavy across the floor, Lucy Foley's thinking maybe it's a body. Did you weave any other real life neighbors into this?
Oh my goodness. I think I have to say no because of the disclaimer in the front of the book, but I'm sure kind of, I always think that characters just jump straight out of my sort of subconscious, my imagination, but I'm sure every character I write is made up probably of kind of in part of kind of little bits of people that I've come across or just seen, you know, in a shop or in a coffee shop or on a plane or something. And then obviously little parts of myself. But I think I'm fascinated, you know, I lived in London for 10 years, and you're kind of really cheek by jowl with your neighbors, and you start to wonder about them. You start to kind of create little narratives about who they are, which are probably completely wrong. but I think it's something we sort of all do. And I think especially actually over the last couple of years and kind of lockdown, we've all in some ways been kind of forced into kind of closer quarters with each other, and there wasn't much to do at times. So I think we're probably doing even more of that.
Yeah, yes, indeed. We are doing more of that. Getting to know our neighbors in a whole new way, and also creating those narratives. Now I'm starting to wonder if my narratives are wrong about these people that I'm always watching. Leslie saying she can't wait to get into this book. Leslie, it is so good. So it is, for those of you who are in Book of the Month, this is a Book of the Month pick. So you can grab this book. And guess what? If you're not, which is the rest of us, not me, you can grab it today from Murder by the Book. So our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore. You can grab your copy today and see what we're all talking about. So I'm going to pop the link into the comments right here, and you can grab it today. Johanna is saying, hi, ladies from Ecuador. Welcome, Johanna. She said, thank you for this. Lucy, you have said the killer changed in all of your thrillers, 6 now. Can you please tell us who they were for the first 2? Ooh, fascinating question, Johanna.
Oh, can I answer that? Is that spoilery for the first 2 books? If I say, because then you'll know who they aren't. I don't know.
We'll know who they aren't, but you always have a hefty list of
I do.
cast of characters, I feel like.
Oh my goodness. So for the hunting party, I can't even remember who it was, because the person that is the killer now seems so obvious to me, but I know that it was a surprise to me that they were the killer. They were the killer. There are lots of sheets. Fine. It was definitely a surprise to me, and that surprise came to me about halfway through writing.
Kaylee's saying, don't get too spoilery.
I know, too spoilery. I'm sorry.
No, that's not too much. We know. There were some females in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer the guest list without. I might have to tweet Johanna separately and tell her, I think.
Okay,
I don't want to spoil the surprise for anyone.
Johanna, hop over to Twitter after this.
Yeah.
Because I love that you share that your characters are evolving organically, that you plot out who it is, but then they surprise you. What's the process of that look like? Lucy, are you sitting there and someone comes up and all of a sudden you hear a voice, it was me. What does that feel like when they reveal themselves as the killer?
I don't know. I suppose it's often when I'm actually not working on the book. It's sort of, and I think that's sometimes where your most exciting ideas come to you as a writer. It's often when I'm kind of going for a walk, or I'm cooking something, or having a bath or something like that. And I think maybe it's that your subconscious is kind of working on it all the time, working on this plot, and you're kind of thinking about these characters all the time. And yeah, I suppose it is almost like a little voice kind of whispers like, but what if I did it? And you start thinking, but you'd be a really unlikely character to do it. And then you think, but actually maybe that's why it would be perfect if you'd kind of done it. So I think that's sort of the process. Talking with the voices in my head sounds a bit
talking with the voices in your head. Johanna, thank you for the great
Thank you. Great question. Yeah.
And Leslie is saying she cannot wait to get into this book. Kaylee said, good morning, Sarah and Lucy. I just started this book this morning. High five from Minnesota. Kaylee, welcome to the conversation. She wants to know, Lucy, did you write this book during COVID, which you did share that you did, and also in the process of having a human baby in addition to a book baby? She'd like to know how did that affect your writing? Great question, Kaylee.
Really good question. I started writing this book in March 2020, so almost exactly 2 years ago now. And it was kind of going into that first kind of lockdown, really, in the UK, where I was at the time. And it was a really kind of scary time with so many unknowns. And, we're just sort of scrolling through the news, like refreshing, seeing kind of more cases building up. It was horrifying. And I think what I found was that as a writer, I felt so lucky because I had this escape. I had this kind of ability to escape into the world of the book. Even if a murder happens in it, or some pretty dark stuff along the way, but I could sort of escape into the world of the book, I could also travel on the page. So I love Paris. I could sort of journey back there in my mind, using the internet for help along the way. I mean, the one frustrating thing was I'd done a couple of research trips before writing, but there were things that I wanted to check. And it took a long time before I was able to check those. It was kind of summer 2021 when I was actually able to go back to Paris finally and just kind of tick them off my list. And I'm so thrilled that I was able to do that. But I think that's the wonderful thing available to us as writers and as readers, that we can escape, we can travel to so many different places through a book, we can kind of live so many different lives. It's wonderful.
I agree. It's been really interesting because I read that mystery and thrillers is the genre that has seen the most growth, the biggest number of readers during the pandemic. And I think it's about that escapism, and also with uncertainty in the world, we know that yes, there's going to be a murder, but everything is going to get resolved and in some sort of justice on the page. And I personally find that really reassuring while things out there are so uncertain.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I think it's also that thing of, it sounds quite evil, but kind of just desserts, that like the bad characters, like that things are going to catch up with them. And thinking about the news at the moment, you kind of wish there was a bit more of that in the world today, a bit more of that certainty. Yeah,
exactly. Because it's heavy out there this week. Just when I thought it couldn't get any heavier, here we are. So my heart goes out to the people in Ukraine, and I stand with them. Sherry is saying, where did this idea from this book come from? Actually, Lucy answered that at the beginning, Sherry, so you can catch that in the replay. But Lucy, do you want to give her just a quick?
Well, yeah, so definitely from staying in this kind of beautiful old apartment building, I guess that gave me the setting for the book. But actually, what I hadn't said was that there was also this idea that kind of grew and grew, and it started with this idea that I wanted to have a kind of missing boy narrative rather than a missing girl narrative, and see kind of how that would kind of change that trope slightly. How would the police react to kind of a missing guy in his mid-30s rather than a young kind of missing vulnerable girl, and just how would that sort of turn things on its head a little bit. And then that grew into this kind of idea of a sister looking for her brother. I was kind of fascinated by how close that relationship is on the surface, and those kind of blood ties, but also the fact that, as I started thinking about it and looking into it, I'm really close with my kind of brother and sister, but I couldn't tell you what they're doing right now, because I haven't texted with them today. And it made me think about the fact that, we don't necessarily know that much about the kind of lives of our adult siblings, even though we sort of have this shared history, this close relationship. And that was sort of fascinating. So as Jess pulls thread, she realizes that Ben is someone kind of different to who she's always imagined him to be, and that he's been sort of living this kind of secret life and had these kind of relationships that she would never have been aware of.
I love that. I love the scene where she gets in his bed because she's exhausted. She's been traveling, and she finds a pair of black lacy knickers, ladies' undies. And it's just it's a moment for those of us with siblings that I think we probably all had that visceral, like, oh God.
I would not want that to happen.
No, you don't want to be in those sheets after whatever. It was so relatable. I felt it viscerally. So I love those moments of this brother-sister relationship, and also how you talk about how they both had the same childhood, but they had a very different childhood, which is also so relatable, because my siblings and I are always like, I remember it this way, and you're like, what? So I thought that was another really fascinating aspect. Sherry, great question. Lucy, thank you for the answer. Okay, Joanna is she saying she will follow up with you on Twitter, and also I'm pronouncing it. I was pronouncing the H. I apologize. It's Joanna. Yes, gotcha, girl. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. Just scrolling through, make sure I don't miss anybody. We have 5. Leslie is saying, thank you so much for being here. Leslie, always a pleasure to have you as well. She said, oh, thank you for everything. I have to get back to work. Leslie, no worries. Great to have you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, exactly. So Lucy, again, there are just so many reviews that I want to share. So specifically, E Online said this will keep you guessing to the very end. The Whodunit will have you saying, "Oh mon Dieu." So is this one of the books that surprised you with the ending, or was this one that actually that stayed with your plan?
Oh no, totally. No, the ending kind of totally knocked me for six. The sort of, yes, don't want to get too spoilery, but I did just suddenly, while I think I was actually baking something, I think it was because it was during COVID, I think I was making sourdough. You know, everyone was making sourdough at one point. Yeah, I think maybe there's something about the act of kind of kneading bread. I don't know. But I just suddenly had this idea for this kind of the big twist towards the end. And it just gave me goosebumps. It was like, well, if I'm surprised, I hope the reader's surprised too.
Excellent. Well, I think we all are surprised by all of your books. Kaylee would like to know, have you started your next book yet? Any working title or plot info you can share with us?
I have started it. It feels it's really nebulous at the moment, and you always don't want to kind of jinx things, but it's sort of it's about the kind of us and them in this like small village community, and the kind of wealthy newcomers from the city, a bit of that. It's sort of, my pitch to my editor was kind of Miss Marple meets The Wicker Man, meets a bit of Soho Farmhouse as well, with those kind of types. So I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Excellent. I was just trying to make sure I get that right. Miss Marple meets The Wicker Man meets, and what was the third one?
Soho Farmhouse, which is like a branch of Soho House, but like a kind of rural version in the UK.
Excellent. And Kaylee, hopefully we skirted being too spoilery for you. Lucy, that sounds absolutely great. Is it hard for you to be in the process of chatting with us about this book, which you wrote 2 years ago, writing a new book? How do you split your brain in that way?
It is funny. I think at the moment I feel very much in the Paris apartment, and it's kind of really exciting because everything's happening at the moment. But I think I did sort of have to consciously last week. I was like, right, so Paris apartment mode, not kind of new book mode, because yeah, I'm very much in that kind of initial sort of plotting it out, thinking about characters. The characters in the new book feel so kind of vivid to me. So yeah, I guess like my brain's a sort of crowded place right now.
Exactly, because it's a different skill to be out here chatting with us and talking about that one book, but also being on as someone who's giving interviews and chatting with readers, versus being in that seed state where you're trying to germinate an idea and create an entire village of characters. It's, I mean, it's just so different.
Totally. I think that's absolutely right. I think it's a very strange thing as an author, really, that you spend most of your time on your own, kind of working away at something on your own, not sharing it with anyone. And then when it comes to publication, you're out and you're chatting about it with people and kind of meeting loads of people. But I kind of love both parts of the job equally. Yeah, both have their own rewards.
That's so great, because I know some people are very shy and don't want to be out. So we love when authors are willing to come out and chat with us. The New York Times, #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Silent Patient, also raving about the Paris apartment, saying extremely evocative with a richly drawn atmosphere you can cut with a knife. Short of a trip to Paris, the next best thing is surely to settle down with a bottle of French wine and devour the Paris apartment. Lucy, is there a favorite review that you have where you're like, at last I am seen, or do you have a favorite?
Oh my goodness, no. I mean, all the ones you've read out, it's just like, oh, it's so lovely. They've just kind of really got what I've been trying to do. I love that Alex Michaelides quote. I think that's such I think quotes from other authors, and the Ruth Ware quotes from other authors feel in a way particularly lovely, because you sort of feel seen by your peers, and kind of they go through the same thing, and it's wonderful to have that sort of respect. So
Exactly, but also vulnerable to have it out to them and to all reviewers, but somehow especially to your peers, where you're like,
Totally.
here is my baby, here is my inside my baby. Do you like it? Please treat it kindly.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. All right. We have 5 minutes left, everybody. So get your last questions in. I want to share this review from Pop Sugar as well. An enticing Parisian locked room mystery with enough twists and turns to keep even the most seasoned of thriller fans guessing. I liked how you sprinkled in some French, so that I think that is one of the ways that you anchored us in the Parisian culture in this Paris environment, but not so much that it was overwhelming to have to look up too many words. How did you manage that, Lucy?
I mean, that was so difficult, and you never know whether you've got it completely right as an author, but I wanted to kind of give that flavor. I think one of the really interesting things I found living in Brussels is that you realize, like, I'll go to a cafe and I'll realize I'm listening to a conversation that's sort of half in English, half in French, half in another language, kind of Europeans just sort of flitting between all these different languages that they speak, which is kind of really awe-inspiring for a Brit, because we're all kind of terrible at speaking other languages. And so in a way, it was also kind of wanting to get that flavor into it, because all of these characters speak fairly good English, or some English, which is kind of true to my experience of traveling to Paris. Definitely.
And when I was in Belgium, the languages are French, Flemish, and Dutch as well.
And German, a bit of German. There's a German speaking area, which I didn't even, it's really embarrassing, but I didn't even realize this before I lived there. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. And when you look at the signs and they're in French, Flemish, Dutch, I mean, and some of them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never seen Flemish before. It is
totally.
Absolutely. Oh, Joanna, speaking of dialogue, said, Lucy, how do you plan dialogue? Yes, your dialogue is so real. Do you read it out loud to yourself? How do you get it so real sounding?
Oh, that's a great question. And really kind. Thanks, Joanna. I think actually it's almost the opposite for me with dialogue. I absolutely can't plan it, because if I plan it, it feels stayed. So I just I think when I first started writing, it was the thing that I found hardest, because it's kind of, it can't be exactly like real speech, but at the same time, it has to have the sort of feel, the flow of kind of real speech, and that sort of bounce back and forth. And it's really difficult, but it's the thing that I now enjoy writing the most. And so I really it sounds weird, but sort of have to kind of sit back and let my characters take over and just not think too much about what I'm writing, just kind of go for it, and then come back to it later and maybe trim and polish and all of that. One of the things I do that I think really helps is I read a lot of screenplays. I'm kind of fascinated by screenwriting, and obviously they're so dialogue heavy, and you get that kind of flavor for speech that's kind of written and crafted but feels like real speech. So things like Succession, like dialogue in Succession, which is one of my favorite TV shows ever. It's that like bam, bam, bam. They're kind of bouncing off each other, and it's got that wonderful flow and rhythm to it.
Oh, that is fascinating. I've never heard anyone say that. What a great idea. Because when I have read, for instance, court transcripts, as I'm researching my next book, when you read actual dialogue, or you try to write down what people say, people do not speak in full, complete, little tasty tidbits. They have finished thoughts, they back up, they repeat themselves. So this is a really fascinating conversation, because I never thought to look at screenplays. How absolutely brilliant. So you like the speed and the pace and of Succession.
Totally. And it's kind of satire as well, isn't it? It's funny, it's sort of dark, it's like horrible to each other, but you can't look away.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Lucy, what is one thing that you wish to share with us that no one has asked you yet? What is maybe something you've never revealed before?
Oh my goodness.
Give us
a question. I don't know. Do I have any secrets? I mean, we all have secrets, and that's the thing. That's why I love love writing about people with secrets. Gosh, off the top of my head, very difficult to think. I suppose my kind of guilty secret is that there is probably a little bit of me in all of my characters, even the really evil ones that you kind of love to hate, because I think that's inevitable as a writer. And I think it's kind of sort of interesting, maybe a bit uncomfortable, sort of exploring those elements of yourself, I think. So yeah, maybe that's my secret.
What part of you do you see in Jess?
Well, Jess, in a funny way, is a little bit like my sort of my alter ego. Like I would want to kind of be a bit more like Jess. I'd like to be a bit braver. I'd like to sort of be a bit more kind of confident in just doing things my own way. And she's quite kind of naughty, you know, she's sort of she's broken the law, she's a bit wild. I'd like to be a bit less kind of good girl, a bit more Jess, because if I were in sort of Jess's shoes, I'd probably just call the police straight away. She has various reasons for not calling the police and for not trusting them and for not trusting authority, but it was just such fun to kind of step into her boots, really, and see things from her perspective.
But also she's quite nosy, isn't she? She thinks nothing of going into people's bathrooms, taking their soaps or perfumes. I mean, I keep thinking, don't go in there. Don't go in there. Don't go into is it cave? Cave?
The cave. Yeah.
Don't go in there. But then she just goes right in.
There is probably an element of me in that, you know, or rather I would kind of like to have a nose around in people's bathroom cabinets, but I'm too good to do that. So
now
I don't.
I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if I ever have Lucy Foley over for dinner, I'll have to clean out the bathroom cabinet. There's just nothing in there.
Lots of clothes.
Oh my goodness. I love this. Okay. Kaylee would like to know coffee or tea while you're writing?
Oh, coffee all the way. Big time. But
you're British. Shouldn't you be drinking tea?
Oh, I mean, I'm not that into tea. Like every so often, a nice cup of Earl Grey. Or when I go to my parents, there's something really comforting about a cup of tea and a biscuit, you know, in the afternoon. But and they're very traditional. They have tea like at a certain time, you know, with a cake or whatever. But no, coffee all the way. And I love kind of going and working in coffee shops, so I can literally have like amazing coffee on tap. So I've got I had favourites when I was living in London that I'd go to, and I just knew that I worked really well there, and I've got the same in Brussels. Kind of, I've got my places where it's got the right vibe, it's got good coffee.
Can you hear me? Okay.
I can now. Yes.
What makes it have the right vibe, Lucy? Is it quiet? Is it cute? Is it loud? Is it crowded? Is it vintage? What makes you be able to write there?
I think it's a bit crowded, like with a bit of a buzz, with some kind of music, some kind of interesting conversation. As I said, like in Belgium, I find it fascinating kind of listening to conversations in all kind of different languages around me. You really feel like you're in the kind of heart of Europe. And sometimes, you know, you hear little snippets of conversation that are fascinating. So like there are in the past, like bits of conversation that I've overheard in coffee shops that have made it into my books, because you just think that's kind of too good not to use. So
any particular example leaps to mind, Lucy? Anything juicy?
Well, I did hear, I overheard, I shouldn't admit this, but total strangers, but I overheard in a very kind of posh bit of London, where I was sitting working at a coffee shop, one woman say to another, I just don't understand why anyone would fly economy class with children. You know, and I was like, oh, it's like lovely that, you know, you can't imagine that scenario. And that went straight into the guest list. So there we go. But I have no idea who these women are. And so
oh my God.
They were totally anonymous.
Love it. All right. Last question coming in from Joanna. She would like to say Poirot or Sherlock?
Oh, great question. I think Sherlock, because I mean, I love Poirot, but he's a bit too together. I love Sherlock's kind of like his dissipation. Like I love that he's a bit sort of, you know, he's kind of sitting there. He's a bit of an addict. He's got all these vices. Poirot doesn't really have any vices. I like my detectives to be kind of quite flawed. And I think Sherlock is the sort of blueprint for the flawed detectives that came after him, I suppose.
Ooh, I love that. Oh, one last question. Any word on the screenplay for the can you give us any information on that?
I should have news to share very, very soon on that. So yeah, watch this space.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank Lucy Foley for joining us live from Belgium, giving us the scoop on the Paris apartment. Lucy, what a pleasure to have had you here. And thank you for all of the backstory, all of your sharing your secrets. I want to remind everyone, grab this book today, y'all. It is out. It is delicious. You are going to love it as much as I do, as much as everyone else here has is enjoying it. I'm popping the link into the comments. So pop over, grab it, support our favorite woman-owned bookstore. They will ship it out to you tomorrow. Lucy Foley, thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to have you back when your next Village book, TBD, to be named, comes out. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And thanks for your brilliant questions. Loved it.
Yay.